matter what the behaviors are of the other VMs on this host, you know that you're going to get that minimum reservation for CPU. Finally, you may just want to, instead of actually defining specific reservations or limits, you may just want to set a normal low or high number of shares to this virtual machine's CPU. Now these are nice because if I have certain virtual machines that I will have more attention, or I want them to receive more attention from resources, I just set them to high and then they've got what they need. And the ones that I'm less careful about, I can set to low, and that makes it very easy. I can also customize the number here by choosing custom and choosing a number. Now the absolute values of these numbers, this is 500, the next one would say, I don't know, 1,000. The absolute values of these numbers are not important whatsoever. It's the relative values of these shares. If one machine has 1,000 shares and the other machine has 2,000 shares, well, the second machine is going to get more resources, equivalent to the difference between 1,000 and 2,000. All of this, what you've seen so far, is just for limiting the CPU, or setting reservations for the CPU. I can at the same time do the same thing for memory as well. Okay, do I want to reserve guest memory? Do I want to lock it out? Do I want to set a reservation or a limit or some shares on guest memory? These are things that you might do in order to protect your other virtual machines that are on that same host from a specific VM that's using too much of the stuff that you have available. Your classic SQL Server example, where the SQL Server tries to eat up as much RAM as you can give it. Well, you might set memory reservations on other VMs. Now, it's generally a good idea to not use these unless it's an absolute requirement. If you have an application that you can throttle its CPU or its memory use in the application itself, it's always a better idea to do so within the application than to try to set these hard reservations. The virtual machine does not necessarily have exposure to the limits that you're placing on it. And so if you can set this inside the virtual machine, you're generally going to get a better response than if you do so outside of the virtual machine. Now, disk shares are relatively useful here because in modern times, I guess in the last couple of years, many virtual environments have realized that the disk is becoming one of the biggest bottlenecks to performance. Now, disk shares are important because with disk shares you can actually limit the maximum number of IOPS, for example, or the shares that are associated with those IOPS, the input-output operations per second, for the disks that are attributed to this virtual machine. So think about this. I've got a number of VMs that are trying to touch this central shared storage. And when they're all trying to do their activities, they're all trying to tell that storage, I need stuff from over here, I need stuff from over here, I need stuff from over here. And the storage does the very best job that it can in retrieving that data and updating that data based off of what the VM requires. When you end up in a situation of contention where the virtual machine requests are greater than what the storage can provide, well, you're going to lose performance. And so what resource allocations here with the disks do, just like with CPU and memory, is give you a mechanism to limit the disk requests for very noisy virtual machines to protect the experience for everybody else. Down here in an advanced CPU are some other of these advanced settings that you're generally not going to set that often because these would identify, for example, which physical processors you might use for this VM, or whether or not you wanted to do core sharing for hyper-threaded CPU or hyper-threaded cores that you have. Both of these, again, you really don't touch that often. So these are the virtual machine options and resource controls that can be placed on a virtual machine. Most of these, as I said, you're not going to mess with. There's just not that much that you need to do with these virtual machines. Now, there are some settings that you might want to do, and many of these have to do with, for example, the virtual disks. You can actually hot extend virtual disks here inside of Vsphere version 5. Here's my VM. This is VM number 1. It is operating. It has Windows Server 2008 installed onto it. If I go back here into Edit Settings, and I take a look at its hard drive here, there we go, you'll notice that I have a provision size of about 41 gigs right now. Now, this virtual machine is operating. It's up and running. It's doing whatever it needs to do at this point. And perhaps, I've walked into the office today and I've got alert that VM1 is just about to run out of disk space. What do I do? In the physical world, well, this can be a problem because I've got to go and add more hard disks and just do all that really awful management, the physical management activities that are required in the physical world. In the virtual world, well, things get a lot easier because hot extending a virtual disk requires nothing more than, well, just upping its provision size and clicking OK.